podcast host Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest, empowerment coach Denise Day.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Keegan. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, thank you for being on. I'm excited to have you on. Uh, I've had other empowerment coaches on before, but the thing is, we're not here to necessarily talk about professions and
Mhm.
really to discuss like how do we fix everything or what are some things we can do. Instead, we're actually here to discuss what it's like to have to deal with a late diagnosis of a mental health disorder or illness, however you want to put it, but something that other people may know early on, a lot of people don't know till later on. And
Mhm.
so we're here to hear your experiences with all of this because it affects someone close and dear to you. And therefore, it's something that other people need to hear because other people deal with the same thing. So,
Yeah.
uh, what is it that really brought you to the show? If
Well, when I saw an opportunity to book, with you, I'll be honest. I saw a lot with recovery and addiction and
mm-hmm,
that, which gosh knows runs in the family too. Who doesn't know, or have
mm-hmm,
somebody like that? And and then I thought, I have a daughter, an adult daughter, who has mental illness, and she's been misdiagnosed. And again, to nobody's fault because they didn't
mm-hmm,
know when she was younger, when she was about 11. Um, and so I need to let people know what it's like as a mom. And I
mm-hmm,
can probably share a little bit about what it's like for my daughter because obviously she does talk to me. We do have a close relationship, and we talk about a lot of things
mm-hmm,
because again, as we go into like 2025, there's still such a stigma with
mm-hmm.
mental illness, and not just with your regular Joes, I'll say, and things like that. And the people where I live, I mean, I live in Amish country,
mm,
so we live in a very tight knit community.
uh,
Not a lot of diversity, not a lot of, just you just know what you know. A lot of farmland and things like this,
mm-hmm,
and I just it's just been frustrating for me
mm-hmm.
that people see my daughter and other people in the community who have a variety of different mental health challenges,
Mhm.
um, and with the judgmental still type of thing,
Yeah.
and just still not understanding. And again, it's frustrating because we're coming into 2025 and we have more than enough information available to us, maybe too much information,
Mhm.
where I really think we should be much further ahead as a society when it
Mhm.
comes to supporting people who have, whatever mental health issues that they have.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to, be on this podcast and just kind of share my story and my journey with my 27-year-old daughter.
Well, that is way too awesome. It is stories like yours that we need to help end the stigma. And like you said, it is 2025 or like closer to we're going into. But the thing is, it is frustrating having to deal with a stigma that carries this unimaginable burden sometimes that we have to face it head on. I think because otherwise it's just going to be sidestepping the issues, you know. And we
Hmm.
have made a lot of progress within the
Yeah.
last 50 years. We really, really have. But that's the thing is that it does take people speaking out about it to let everyone know, like, hey, this works, this doesn't, or maybe we need to look at everything from a different little perspective. But having that stigma really does affect literally everything from day in day out activities to
Hmm.
major activities, and sometimes it can strain relationships, it can
Hmm.
strain jobs, it can strain literally anything and everything because it's misunderstanding, it's misinformation, and it's also a lack of an understanding and
Yeah.
information.
And
So,
I was just thinking as you were just talking, and people with mental health issues,
mhm,
challenges, I'll just say, depression,
mhm,
they're still each individual. They're
yeah,
individuals. So just because,
mhm,
maybe I say I have depression or something like that, um, I may handle things differently than somebody else that,
mhm,
has depression. And that's the other thing I try to explain to people. They're still individuals. So just
yeah,
because you may know Susie down the road who is autistic doesn't mean that she has the same behaviors or her brain works exactly the same way as my
mhm,
daughter's
yeah,
and things like that. So that's also, you know,
oh yeah,
there's that stereotype still, but I also don't want people to go, okay, I understand. For example, I'm going to talk about my daughter being on the spectrum.
mhm,
But don't pigeonhole people. Don't
yeah,
put all those people into the same
no,
box, especially on the spectrum, because there's a reason it's called the spectrum, right? It's like,
yeah,
"Whoa."
it's very
And they're
wide.
learning more and more and more. So
Mhm,
it seems like it's getting longer and longer and longer.
mhm,
So there's a lot of intricacies, I think,
yep.
that go into that as well.
Oh yeah. That is absolutely correct and true because if you start treating people like a barcode,
Mm-hmm.
then it's going to be not good.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, every person is their own person, and therefore, what causes one thing is not necessarily the cause for someone else, and what fixes something may not be the remedy for someone else as well. And that's a lot like recovery that I've experienced myself and I've seen in other people. What works for me works for others sometimes and not all the time, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. And it's sometimes trial and error. And that's one of the frustrating things about figuring out what's going on in our heads because your daughter was misdiagnosed
Mm-hmm.
and later out finds out that is actually on the autism spectrum, and so there's a lot of frustration that goes on in there. It goes like, well, it the DSM-5 says this, this, and this, so you must have this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, not necessarily, because there's these intricacies, which means no, maybe it could be related to this, and then we solve this problem, and actually this one now surfaces, and so on and so forth, and it can just be a whole muddle mess. But
Yeah.
uh,
And then bring in the life experiences, what
mm-hmm,
life how life has affected
mm-hmm,
each of those individuals.
yeah,
And now you're dealing with a whole heck of a lot more, a whole gamut of
mm-hmm,
things. And that's one of the things my daughter deals with, and that obviously I am dealing with too as her mom,
mm-hmm,
because the things that have happened to her,
mm-hmm.
the hurtful, terrible things that have happened to her, have affected my family terribly.
Mhm.
You know, she, yeah, I'll kind of, if it's okay, I'll kind of start like with her
Yeah.
her journey a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
So again, she's 27 years old,
Okay.
and she when she was born, she started with a traumatic birth right off the
Mm.
bat. So she was
Oh.
actually a twin. Her twin sister, whose name was Brenna, was stillborn, and my
Mhm.
daughter Katie was dying. So I had to have an emergency C-section, and we
Mm.
almost lost Katie. So she started life with separation anxiety immediately
Oh.
and with trauma. And then the more I've read through the years about traumatic births and stuff, very interesting. I actually just read a short article this week that says that sometimes traumatic births, that person could be on the spectrum eventually,
Mm.
or like born early or whatever. So they were 6 weeks early, which isn't
Mm.
huge, but she was also dying
Yeah.
in utero. My daughter was. Again, I lost one, and then my daughter Katie was dying in utero. So she had a very traumatic birth. I
Mm.
didn't get to hold her for 3 days because they had to
Oh.
take her to the NICU
Mhm.
downtown, where and I'm about 45 minutes from where that is. So she
Oh
started
man.
off even with separation anxiety,
Mm.
from her sister, from me,
Uh.
from the day that kid was born. When she was just tiny, if she
Mm.
wasn't touching me, she'd scream.
Oh
It
man.
was it was quite it was actually, now that I look back, it wasn't so funny back then, but it was, now it's like fascinating as I look back.
Mhm.
So she was always very shy, and
Mhm.
of course had that separation anxiety, in particular with me.
Uh-huh.
And then she started school.
Mm.
And I remember she
Mhm.
always just wanted to have like one friend. She could never be, she could be in a group. I shouldn't
Oh.
say that, but she was not comfortable
Always had to
with a
have the.
group. She
Mhm.
felt left out. She worked too hard to whatever, you know.
Mhm.
So she would latch on to one friend, and
Mm.
God help you if that friend went to go with somebody else, or my daughter would have a meltdown.
Mm.
And I never understood, I was like, it just, I'm like, why is she having this meltdown? Why is she, now I look back, I'm like, I want to say it's the separation, anxiety. She just kind of wanted to have just that one person.
Mhm.
So, when she started school, I remember when she started kindergarten, again, very shy kid. And
Mhm.
her teacher would tell me, every time we have to go out of the classroom, like go to gym class or art class, she goes, Katie has to go to the bathroom. She goes, but I don't think she's going because I can see her shoes right by the door. Like she just goes in. So, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I wonder why she's doing that. I had no
Mhm.
idea.
Hmm.
I look back and I'm like, oh, she was trying to get herself ready to go into another transition.
Mm.
That's what she was doing. She was kind of getting herself, she was trying to get some courage up, whatever she was needing to do
Mhm.
to move from this scenario where maybe she was a little comfortable. Now she has to go, to art class. And even though she's really artistic, she's very creative, she may love art class.
Mhm.
It was very hard for her to go from, whatever they were doing in that kindergarten class, to
Mhm.
go out in that hallway, walk down the hallway and go into art class,
Oh
and
man.
then to leave art class, walk back down the hallway and come into her regular classroom. Um,
Mm.
Again, at the time, none of us had any idea why she was doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when she turned about 10 years old, one
Mhm.
day I went to walk out the door with her to go to my mom's house, and she loves my mom. They're very tight, and she wouldn't go,
Mm.
and she wouldn't leave my house. Like
Huh.
it felt like it happened overnight. And I'm like, what is wrong? And I'm like getting frustrated. I'm about to get angry because we're supposed to be somewhere.
Uh.
And she couldn't tell me. She didn't know. She just goes, I'm afraid I can't go out. I can't go out.
Hmm.
And then this was happening for school every
Oh
morning.
no.
I actually had to leave my job. I had a part time job. I had to leave my part time job because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get her into school.
Mm.
And again, I just thought it was separation anxiety. Yeah, I just thought it was it was this anxiety for some reason. But I had all these thoughts because it happened. It did seem like it was just like this so quickly. And I was like, why? Okay, is somebody bullying her? Has somebody touched her who shouldn't have been touching her? Like I got all these thoughts in my head,
Yeah.
and things like that. So unfortunately, the principal of that school at that time, again, not to her fault because she didn't know, but
Mhm.
the thing she was trying to do to get my daughter into school made everything worse. Like one
Mm.
time she actually picked her up to carry her in, and my daughter's kicking. And at that age, my daughter was already almost as tall as me. She's a tall girl now,
Mhm.
and things like that. And, then that just imprinted in her, that horrible experience.
Mhm.
So, found her a counselor who was absolutely phenomenal. And she goes,
Okay.
I have never seen anxiety so bad in a kid this young.
Oh.
She goes, I do recommend medicine. because I'm like the type of person I have to be almost dying to take Tylenol. I just,
Yeah.
and it's not that I'm against medicine, but I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you telling
Mhm.
me? So the counseling was wonderful.
Mhm.
Again, she was diagnosed with anxiety, and then, of course, that cycle of depression, OCD, right?
Mhm.
All three of those things with my daughter. Well, it was so bad at school for her. And again, we're talking elementary school at this time. We had to
Yeah.
pull her out at the beginning of fifth grade, and we
Mhm.
homeschooled her
Mm.
because she just could not get into school. The teachers and the principal didn't understand. I didn't understand.
Mhm.
And we were all making everything worse for her. I didn't know it at the time, but her
Yeah.
counselor said, "You better pull her out of school. Her mental health is more important. She's an intelligent girl. She's,
Uh-huh.
you don't have to worry about academics. Her
Mhm.
mental health is more important." So we did that. So again, that was the beginning of fifth grade.
Mhm.
Sixth grade, we put her into a public school here where we live.
Mhm.
And she still had anxiety and things like that. She was bullied pretty well. I
Mm.
did by typically by one girl, and I let her know what she needed to do to have that girl stop bullying her. And finally, my daughter listened to me, and the bullying stopped.
Oh yeah.
But um, she still just struggled, had a hard time making friends,
Mhm.
And again, for people to look at her, she's intelligent, she's beautiful, she's funny,
Mhm.
she's sociable when she's in her element.
Yeah.
She's athletic. It was like one of those. It's like she had everything, and it was hard to figure out why she couldn't make friends.
Mhm.
And now, why is she getting bullied? And things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then she ended up sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. Now we come into high school as a freshman. My daughter is a phenomenal volleyball player,
Mhm.
absolutely phenomenal volleyball player. So she was the setter on the varsity team as a freshman. And she was so horribly bullied in that school because she would
Mm.
do when she was anxious, she would do her rocking, right?
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Self stim. Now I didn't know what all this meant. I just
Mhm.
knew, it's like I figure when you hold a baby and you rock it, it kind of feels, baby, and then you calm
Mhm.
yourself. So I'm like, okay, she's rocking to calm herself.
Uh-huh.
But when she did that, she was called a freak. She was called
Mhm.
it. You
Mm.
name it, that's what they called her in the school. Another principal who I had to have words with, he was horrible. I had to have words with him and things
Mhm.
like that. So we had to unfortunately pull her out of school in the middle of ninth grade,
Oh no.
and because she was self harming, you
Oh
know,
man.
hanging out with
No.
people she should never been hanging out with,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
things like that. The group that she found to fit in with was really not a group she should have been hanging out with.
Uh-huh.
So, but again, I still see a lot of those kids now as grown-ups. They weren't terrible people, right? They were just making their way through high school as well.
Mhm.
Um, so we ended up pulling her out. She ended up getting her GED. She never went back to school
Mm.
into a brick and mortar building,
Yeah.
or anything like that. She was on medication
Hmm.
with the diagnosis of anxiety. And
Mhm.
I think she was on, by the time she weaned her own self off,
Oh,
I think
wow.
about five different medications, and none worked.
Oh
Now
man.
I'm thinking, because it wasn't anxiety,
Mhm. Yeah.
she's on the spectrum. But again,
Mhm.
nobody knew at this time.
Yeah.
So she ended up, I forget how old she was, Keegan, but I didn't know she was doing this. She weaned herself off her medication for anxiety. At that time, she was on three of them at the
Oh
same
wow.
time. And they made everything worse. She just got worse and worse and worse. So she weaned
Mm.
herself off. And when she finally told me, I was like, that's fine with me.
Mhm.
I said it wasn't helping anyway, unfortunately. and
Yeah.
things like that. So, here we are in our teenage years and things like that. She's still going out with people that I would have preferred her not to be hanging out with and
Uh-huh.
things like that. And then she ended up getting sexually assaulted.
Mm.
And I didn't know for about a year and a half.
Oh no.
And I remember when she came home that night, it was like a totally different person. I had no idea who this was. Like it
Oh.
was, I thought, okay, she doesn't smell like alcohol. Again, alcoholism
Mm.
runs in my family. So I'm like, I'm like, was she doing
Mm.
drugs at the party? Like all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
going through my head. It never, ever occurred to me that somebody raped her at that party. I don't know
Mm.
why, it just never occurred to me. So I'm like in her room looking to see if I can find stuff. I'm doing everything. She's still self harming.
Mm.
She's writing stuff all over her body, calling herself a freak, a nut, it. She had all this stuff going on. And I'm telling, if you saw my daughter, nobody would believe it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you just wouldn't believe it to see her.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, I didn't know for about a year and a half that she had been raped at a party
Oh
she was
no.
at. And then
Oh.
at 16, she got pregnant with my amazing, beautiful granddaughter, who is the love of my life. I love this kid so much. Um, so now we have my 27-year-old daughter, who I still think is just, not just, but diagnosed with anxiety, depression, OCD,
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with the wrong people. And believe it or not, she's never had a drink of alcohol in her life.
Oh wow.
Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my ex-husband, he's actually been sober, I think, for about 31 years now.
Oh
So from
wow.
the time she was little, we always taught her about addiction and how
That's
she's
good.
probably at high risk for anything because it
Mm-hmm.
runs on both sides of our family. Okay. My
Yeah.
dad was an alcoholic, an abusive alcoholic. So she was pretty well. Are you kidding me? Lost Keegan. Oh, there he is. Hi.
I have no idea what happened.
That's
I
okay. We're
just
back.
saw, yeah, I just saw like my camera go bloop, and I was like, okay.
I just saw me. I'm like, I lost Keegan.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened. I
That's
don't know.
okay.
Anyways, as you were saying, at this point, she is dealing with anxiety, OCD.
And they were saying depression still.
Mm-hmm.
Teenage mom,
Mm-hmm.
and and my granddaughter's dad, who is a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful father now. He was a teenager too, so now we have these two teenagers who are teenagers doing teenage stuff. So,
Uh-huh.
I'm left kind of to start raising this beautiful baby and things like
Mm.
that, which was fine. But with that said, so then she ended up dating somebody else,
Mm.
and I knew immediately, Keegan, that this was not going to be good. So
Uh-oh.
they dated, and he ended up sexually assaulting her more than once. And I didn't know
Oh.
it again for over a year after it happened.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Mm-mm.
so, um, with that said, now you figure she's been sexually assaulted more than once. She's
Mhm.
still diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and OCD. Okay, we're
Mhm.
still not to the spectrum thing yet, right?
Yeah.
So, we're just dealing with a gamut of stuff like this, and I am with the sexual assault that happened to her. She looked at me and she goes, "Mom, please don't go after him," because I have three brothers. I'm just like I'm more of an yes, I'm more like my brothers, not like, oh, whatever.
Mhm.
And so
Tackle the
now
issue head on.
we add this to the plate now,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Anxiety, depression, OCD. My daughter feels she's unworthy.
Mhm.
The only thing she's good for is to be with guys, unfortunately,
Mhm.
and all this other stuff. And so got rid of that guy. Thank goodness. Our relationship was terrible during this time.
Mm.
It was terrible, and I was focused on raising the granddaughter. To be quite honest with you,
Yeah.
that her name's Annabelle. She became my priority
Mhm.
because she had to.
Yeah.
Somebody had to take care of this little kid. So
Mhm.
anyway, kind of, you know, moving forward then. So that was around 19, 20 years old.
Mhm.
Again, she's 27 right now, and we still, she didn't have her license yet, a driver's license. I think she got her
Mhm.
driver's license maybe at about 23, 24 years old, and I couldn't figure out why either. I'm like,
Hmm.
everybody wants their flipping license. I'm tired of driving you everywhere, you know. I mean, I have a lot on my plate now. I had to
Mhm.
go back to work full time to help make ends meet with an extra mouth to feed.
Mhm.
I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff. So with this said, like she finally got her license. Again, at this time, I still don't know why it took her so long to get her license. I just
Mhm.
kept chalking it up to the anxiety and the depression and all this other stuff. And then she finally got her license, which was awesome. She got her first and really only job.
Mhm.
It was with the company I was with at that time, and she did great. It was wonderful. Gave her something to do, and then
Mhm.
unfortunately, she got laid off about this time last year.
Oh no.
Um, but we would talk, and I would be like, "You're so intelligent, Katie," and she is, and she's very creative. I said, "There's so
Mhm.
many online things you could do
Mhm.
now, right? Look at all the online things we can do now." Because I knew
Uh-huh.
being out in public probably wasn't going to be her gig because
Uh-huh.
of her anxiety and that. And she's like, "Oh, I have this dream, this dream, and this dream." She goes, but she just could never follow through with anything.
Mm.
And she would take in as much information as she could.
Uh-huh.
She can't take in enough information,
Yeah.
yet. I'm like, well, what are we
Yeah.
doing with all the information?
Mhm.
Information's lovely, but if we don't do anything with it, now this is my way of thinking, right?
Mhm.
The neurotypical brain. Then what's the point? If
Uh-huh.
I'm taking in all this information, I'm not doing anything with it, what's the point? Well, we come to find out um, this past year, she just herself, because she is intelligent and she loves a lot of information, she started doing a lot of research herself.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Mom," she goes, "I'm going to send you something. And it's about she goes, "I think I'm neurodivergent." And I'm like, not even sure what that means. I
Mhm.
figured it out just from neuro and divergent, things like
Yeah.
that. I was able to kind of figure it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, I think I'm on the autistic spectrum." And the funny thing is, when I was in college and right out of college, I worked with people with autism, but these
Mm.
were um, pretty severe kiddos with autism, and things
Yeah.
like that. So I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because that's all I knew
Uh-huh.
were the kids that I worked with who, would most of them would not ever be able to live on their own, you
Yeah.
know, um, and things like that. So I was like, "What are you talking about?" No, all this other stuff, maybe a little denial on mom's
Mhm.
part. I don't know. So she kept sending me things. And I was looking at like the checklists and I'm like, "Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's Katie. That's Katie. That's Katie.
Mhm.
That's Katie." And then I could go back and look
Mhm.
through the years. And I'm like, oh my
Ah.
gosh, that would have been a red flag. That
Uh-huh.
would have been a red flag. That's Katie. That's Katie.
Mm.
So here we are in 2024, and we don't have a medical diagnosis of being on
Mm.
the autistic spectrum.
Uh-huh.
Quite honestly, I don't think I need it.
Yeah.
And Katie will not. She won't get a true medical diagnosis with it anyway,
Mhm.
which is fine. But now again, we find out she's neurodivergent. She's on the spectrum,
Mhm.
and now it's like, now what?
Yeah.
Now what? I have looked and looked to see how I could be a support for her,
Mhm.
and things like that. And I have yet to find anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I know Katie researches a lot of things, and she's on TikTok and stuff like that. And so she
Mhm.
listens to other people on the spectrum, and she'll send some of those to me, which I appreciate because it helps me understand her better,
Yeah.
right? And how she thinks, and how her brain works. And she's very emotional. She's always been
Mhm.
pretty immature emotionally.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, from the time she was a toddler. So I appreciate her sending me those things, but I'm like, yeah, but nobody's really saying, well, now what do you do? Like,
Mhm.
here's an example. She's been driving.
Mhm.
So this past summer, somebody almost hit her.
Oh
So she
no.
won't drive now.
Yo.
So I have to drive my granddaughter to school, bring her home. So here I am
Mhm.
again with all of this on my plate, which is
Oh man.
frustrating for me, and it's caused issues in my daughter and my relationship at
Mhm.
times. So there's just the people she listens to will explain, this is how I feel or how this affects me, but there's still no, okay, but now what do I do? Like,
Mhm.
I'm like, how do I get my daughter to drive again? How do I, or help her, or support her, whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
And she hasn't been able to have a job.
Yeah.
She gets overwhelmed. How do
Mhm.
I support her the best I can financially? It's difficult,
Mhm.
you know. So that's right now a little bit where we are,
Mhm.
with all of that. And she has done counseling as a young adult, but that was mainly for the sexual assault
Mm.
and some separation anxiety. Her best friend overdosed, heroin overdose. So
Oh.
she's lost a couple friends too, all to like overdoses. So, she's had a lot of loss, a lot of hurt.
Mhm.
And right now she has a lot of anger and resentment
Yeah.
that she is trying to navigate through. And again, I've been looking for people for me to find support for
Yeah.
myself,
Mhm.
and for Katie, and things like that. I've had to learn to set boundaries for myself with her,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
and having to just kind of like trial and error,
Mhm.
kind of know when to pull her in and when to hold her, and when to call BS, you know. Um, and and that just kind of goes back, Keegan, to like the stereotype,
Mhm.
because um, people think that she's using me as a doormat. And
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, I know I've enabled her at times through her life.
Oh
I'm not going to deny that I
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people have been like, well, she's like sometimes a conniving, little bee,
Mhm.
little brat. She's manipulative. She's blah, blah, blah. And I'm
Mhm.
like, sometimes she is. However, let's think about it this way. Why?
Uh-huh.
Why does she
Yeah.
try to manipulate?
Mhm.
Let's not just call her names. We have to, what's that underlying reason as to why she's behaving like this.
Yeah.
So includes my family. It's very difficult to get them to see that most of it, she's not manipulating, she's not conniving.
Mhm.
That's just how her brain is wired. And
Yeah.
she's been through so much pain and trauma. She has PTSD, I have no doubt, from
Mhm.
everything she's been through. She wanted to kill herself, I don't know how many
Mm.
times.
Mhm.
as a teenager,
Yeah.
from everything she went through. So again, it's been a long journey.
Mhm.
Um, it's been frustrating, and it's frustrating for me still that especially my family won't. I want to say what you think. You don't trust me as her mom as to what I'm telling you, or
Mhm.
things like that. So, um, yeah, my heart just goes out to anybody with any kind of mental health challenge, because I see as a mom, um, what goes on. I hear what people say,
Mhm.
um, and I'm at a point where I don't keep my mouth shut anymore,
Yeah.
because somebody needs to advocate for her, for my daughter,
Mhm.
and I'm the only one basically who does it.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not going to stop doing it. And sometimes, like I said, I'm wrong when it comes to how I handle things with her.
Mhm.
But I'm learning. I'm learning
Yeah.
too. You don't know until you try something, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now. And she's had a really rough summer.
Mm.
And it stems from, honestly, her sexual assault and things like that.
Yeah.
So she's been trying to deal with that. And again, even with that, Keegan, people just don't understand. And I
Mhm.
tell them, I said, well, you can't unless it happened to you, first of all.
Yep.
But you can be sympathetic, empathetic,
Mhm.
kind,
Oh yeah.
something,
Mhm.
and that's what I ask of people. I said, it's that saying, we don't know what's going on in somebody else's house,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep.
and so let's quit judging people, because we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And I'm just pretty much so frustrated that I'm not always, I don't know, lack for a better word, politically correct when I'm talking to people about this. I'm pretty much just like, bam, this is it.
Yeah. But
You're
no.
not right. So, but that's just where my journey's taken me.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's just the way it is. So, and the more I've read about the late diagnosis with the women, is like what you and I mentioned before, we started
Mhm.
recording, is those young girls, the society teaches young little girls to be those proper cute little girls sitting there,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so they're not acting out like the boys, because boys have all that energy and all this other stuff. So the
Mhm.
girls, nobody nobody realizes
No.
that that's what they're doing. And when I would get her from school, she would get in the car and we get home and she'd have this meltdown and start crying, like in like
Mhm.
kindergarten, first grade. And I'm just like, what in the heck is wrong? Because this isn't my girl.
Mhm.
And her counselor told me, she said, Denise, she tries to stay so perfect
Mhm.
every minute in school. She's so afraid to get in trouble. She's so afraid to break a rule. She's so afraid of what somebody's going to say to her,
Mhm.
that she holds all of that in. And then when she gets home, it just all comes out.
No.
And I was like,
Mm.
oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
And then the other thing the counselor told me, even though, again, we were talking about just anxiety, depression, OCD at that time, when I
Mhm.
kept telling her, I said, I just don't get this. And I'm just like, just do it. Because that's me. I'm like, just do it, just
Mhm.
get it done.
Yeah.
And her counselor looked at me and she said, Denise, do you think she wants to be like this? And
Mm.
it was
Yeah.
like, again, that light bulb, Keegan. I was like, my gosh, no, why would she? She's miserable.
Mhm.
So that's what I say to people when they're
Yep.
questioning my daughter,
Mhm.
to me, or questioning my parenting of my daughter. And I'll be
Mhm.
like, do you think, like, they're like, well, she doesn't do anything, must be nice. She lays around all day. She doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
And I'm
No.
like, do you think she wants to be like this? Because you can see she's not happy. Who
Mhm.
wants to be unhappy their whole life every minute of the day? I
No.
don't think anybody goals for that. That's not our goal, our
Yeah.
dream.
No.
So so just those couple things, that counselor at that time told me really
Mm-hmm.
have helped me even today now.
Yeah.
Talking to my daughter and trying to figure out how to help her navigate, try to help myself navigate through
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing.
Oh,
So
man.
that's kind of my journey with her right now
Okay.
at this time.
Man, it has been one heck of a journey. Hang on. I do hear myself echo from you real quick. Here, let me turn down.
Okay.
Is that any better? Nope. Uh, Here.
I can't tell you're echoing.
Yeah, it's echoing on my end from you, I think, but I should be able to edit it out. So, anyways, that's going to throw me off here on myself. uh,
So I was
uh,
just telling you that's kind of my journey with her
yeah,
so
and
far.
that is a very big journey. It is very crazy. Hang on, let me do this real quick so I can actually hear talk.
Okay.
Um, that's a huge journey. There's a lot that goes on in there. Everything that went on from uh, being in kindergarten and going to the bathroom just to wait around in between sessions and stuff. That as soon as you said that, that was kind of like, okay, yeah, there's something going on. Because for
Yeah.
someone, a child, to mentally prepare themselves in such a manner, it's kind of like, wow, like that is some midlife crisis level
Yeah.
stuff. Um, and it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the moment. But like you said, looking back at it, there's a lot, and I can
Mhm.
only imagine what kind of stress I would have put myself through if I were in your shoes. So it can't be easy, and I'm so glad that you're actually here and supporting and advocating for your daughter and for people that are like her, because that includes so many people that we'll never know because they either don't seek help, they don't admit it, or they just will deny it until they die. And then you have other people that don't suffer from all this, and like you said, they're kind of judging, bullying, and discriminating, and it's not right because yeah, we may look normal, but that's the thing, is that like you said, you never know what's going on in someone's house, and that also goes on with someone's head.
Yeah.
So uh
Yeah,
it does.
I was sharing actually with my mom because my mom has a real hard time, and again, I mean, my mom is open minded, but it's still different generation. My mom's 87
Mhm.
years old.
Yeah.
My mom was a single mom and that abusive. My dad was abusive to her.
Mhm.
And then, she raised four of us basically on her own, working two jobs and stuff. She didn't really have time to be dramatic about, she was just putting food on the table for us. But
Yeah.
so she has had a hard time understanding because, she's like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of person, because that's what she did. But
Mhm.
she was able to do that. That's how she raised us, but we're all able to do that because
Mhm.
we have the neurotypical brain. So I had to keep telling my mom, I was like, listen mom, her brain doesn't work like mine does, mom, like
Mhm.
yours does. And it was one of those where I had to tell her, I said, she doesn't want to be like this, mom.
Mhm.
She wishes she didn't have to be like this. And I told my mom, I said, I'll give you a very easy example, mom. When
Mhm.
Katie has to take a shower. Okay. I looked at my mom. I said, what do? When it's time you want to go take your shower. She
Mhm.
goes, well, I go in the bathroom, I get undressed, the water runs, take my shower, do my thing, dry off, put my clothes on.
Uh-huh.
And I said, Katie is already overwhelmed before she gets in the shower
Mhm.
because she knows that now she has really long hair and she has very
Mhm.
curly hair. She knows that the dripping of the hair down her back is going to drive her crazy. She
Mhm.
cannot stand that feeling, mom. It drives her crazy.
Mhm.
If the water hits her in a way that isn't appealing to her, that
Mhm.
bothers her.
Yeah.
And I said, and then she has to dry her hair. And again, curly hair, it's almost
Mhm.
down to her butt. It takes
Mhm.
her almost an hour to dry her hair. By that time, she's exhausted. But I told my mom, I said, Katie already is tired here
Mhm.
in her mind with her
Mhm.
thinking before she even does something simple like get in the shower.
Yeah.
And when I explained that to my mom in that way, my mom still can't truly understand it. Again, if you don't feel that, how do you understand it?
Mhm.
However, I told her, I said, something as simple as a shower, mom. I said, so now we're getting on Katie and trying to pressure her to drive a car. I
Mhm.
said, I don't want her driving a car if she's not comfortable driving. She's going to hurt somebody. She's going to hurt herself. She's going to hurt her
Mhm.
child.
Mhm.
Hold down a job.
Yeah.
I said, the job she had when she was working with the company I was working with, it was remote.
Mhm.
Um, it was a lot of information she got to take in, which she
Mhm.
thrives on. It was for me what I would call tedious work, but
Mhm.
that's how her brain is. She just bam, 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 give her information and she'll get it into you as quickly as possible. So I try to explain to my mom and other people, I'm like, she can't just go out and get any job
Mhm.
like some of us can,
Yeah.
right? I can go out and try any job.
Mhm.
She can't do that. She
Yeah.
really can't. And it took me, Keegan, it really was hard for me. At one time, I finally said to myself, right now, she's not capable. And that was hard for
Mhm.
me to say because I would
Yeah.
never want to say that about my daughter
Mhm.
because I've always told her, you're more than capable of anything you put your mind to, which I still believe. But right now, she's not capable of driving.
Mhm.
She's just not.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to risk that. I'm not going to push her. I'm not going to do any of that, or
Mhm.
make her belittle her or make her feel bad about it because she already feels bad enough. I tell people, I said, she
Mhm.
beats herself up more than anybody ever will.
Oh
I
yeah.
said, why am I going to add to that?
Yeah.
Why are you going to add to that? I said, you
Mhm.
don't see her sitting over. I point because she lives across the driveway. You don't see her over there crying,
Mhm.
wishing she wasn't like this. Sometimes I feel like I want to videotape her, but I don't want to do that to her. And then show people and just say, this is what it looks like when she's in an autistic meltdown.
Mhm.
She's smacking her head against the wall. She's hitting herself so hard she's bruised.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you, just, again, other people that really need to learn about this are people in the medical field. We have
Mhm.
had horrible experiences in the emergency room. And
Mhm.
that was with me kind of prepping the doctor as
Mhm.
to how Katie is.
Yeah.
And and it's still like they threaten. They're like, if you don't settle down, I'm calling the ambulance, you're going to the psychiatric hospital.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, what? And I have pulled more than one doctor out of a room out in the hallway. And I said,
Mhm.
listen, you and I are having a talk right now. If you ever say that to her again, you're going to have
Mhm.
problems with me. I was like, so even I think that's a big area now that I'm talking about it, like the medical field and things like that.
Mhm.
I thought to myself, oh my gosh, these poor people, she's in a total autistic meltdown. She has been sexually assaulted. Now you have
Mhm.
people coming in, poking and prodding in places you don't want to be poked and prodded.
Yeah.
And she's taking in the lights, she's taking in the smell, she's taking in the noises, people in and out of a room.
Mhm.
The touch of the sheets on the bed drive her crazy because
Yeah.
she has sensitivities as to how things feel for her.
Mhm.
So she has all this overstimulation going on, and then they'll walk in the room and go, "If you don't settle down, you need to go to psychiatry."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, that's not what she's here for." And I have to really, I get very bold. I like now I have no problem.
Mhm.
The last doctor, I kind of took him by his shirt and kind of pushed him out in the hallway, and I said, you and I have to have another conversation because apparently you forgot the first one we had because he threatened her. He
Oh
got like
no.
right in her face because she was having an autistic meltdown and she was hitting
Mm.
herself like this really
Uh-huh.
hard. And he got in her face, a man. She's been raped. Now she has a man in her face hovering over her, threatening her that she's going to the psychiatric hospital. And I
Yeah.
honestly, I took the back of his shirt, I pulled him away. I opened the door and I kind of went like this out in the hallway. I said, "You and I have to have a talk again."
Good.
I said, "Because if people keep doing this, how am I
Mhm.
ever, if she has another whatever's happening, how am I supposed to ever get her back in a hospital? How am I ever supposed to get her
Mhm.
to a doctor if we can't trust you guys?"
Yeah.
So I would really love someday to see the medical field, dentists, anybody like that,
Mhm.
really try to understand how to help these people.
Yeah.
And with that scenario I just gave you, the emergency room we were in also has a pediatric emergency room. So they have the
Mhm.
adults in the pediatric emergency room. And
Mhm.
this doctor came up with a brilliant idea. He goes, "You know what? We have fidget toys in the
Uh-huh.
pediatric emergency room. Do you think those would help your daughter?" I said, "Gosh, yes, go bring those fidget toys in here."
Yep.
And guess what? That calmed her down.
Mhm.
Fidget toys.
Mhm.
So again, I'm hoping that that physician at that emergency room remembers that for the next person that comes in, instead of
Mhm.
threatening them,
Yeah.
who's possibly on the spectrum.
Mhm.
So again, it's frustrating because my daughter's been treated horribly more often than not with medical things in the
Mhm.
medical field. The doctors and nurses and everybody. And again, I get it. You don't know, but gosh darn it, you're in the medical field. You better start learning about it.
Yeah. Or at least have better bedside manners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um.
Yeah.
Well,
So, yeah, I forgot I wanted to get that medical
oh
thing in
no
there
no
too, because I really,
no!
if
It's a
there's
big
people
one.
out there, let me tell you, something has to
Mhm.
change.
Yep. And that is where it needs to also start too, because that's where everyone's listening for the news on how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things like they research it or make studies for it, and then you put it into real world application, see how well it does, and then people kind of experiment from there. And with again, maybe it works for some people, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of those things. A lot of internet sub communities and stuff have started popping up all over the place, trying to help out all sorts of people. And that's one of the resources that might help. Like, I don't know if you know Reddit, um, but they have
Mm-mm.
it's called REDDIT.
Okay.
Let me make sure I'm spelling it right because yeah, REDDIT, Reddit. And they have sub communities for basically anything and everything you can think of. So once you're in the search bar, you'll just look up, say, autism or
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergence, and you can find a whole bunch of different things. And maybe someone has some ideas or some little tricks and tips that work, and maybe some that might help Katie pass
Okay.
on to someone else. So that's just one of those things that it really does come down to a community effort. It does start from within and then it spreads from the outside. So I think it's awesome that you're here. You're trying to spread support and advocacy for your daughter and for all those people because they need it. We need it. And that medical field thing is a huge one. It really is. And
Yeah.
uh, I just got to
I,
say, it does
yeah.
take a lot of bravery to do this too. Um, so I got to say thank
I
you.
tell you, here's just a real short story because it's with the medical field again.
Uh huh.
It was during COVID.
Okay.
And also my daughter has a lot of physical issues.
Mhm.
And again, I know some of that can be because of the autistic
Uh huh.
part of her and things like that. So she has been in the emergency room quite a bit.
Mhm.
But during COVID, I had to, take her there, and I couldn't go in,
Mhm.
and things like that. And of course, she's an adult, so if she were a little kid, I probably would have been able to go in, but I couldn't go in. So I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting for her, and she's texting me from the
Mhm.
room, and she's crying, and she's so upset
Mhm.
because the doctor came in, and she's like, well, and my daughter had been throwing up nonstop for about 3 days.
Oh.
When I say nonstop, I mean like every 15 minutes.
Oh boy.
and things like that. So obviously, very dehydrated, potassium's dropping to
Mm-hmm.
dangerous levels and stuff like that. And this, young doctor looks at her and she goes, "Well, I just don't understand why you're in here. Maybe
Oh
you should
boy.
go see a psychiatrist."
Mm.
And I'm like out in my car. I'm like, I just want to bust through the doors because I kept telling her, I said, well, at the time though, we didn't know though she's on the spectrum either. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, we just figured this out but I'm just thinking to myself, because she was having a little bit of a meltdown, but I'm going to tell you, I
Mm-hmm.
was so proud of her because for the most part, she held her own
Yeah.
and she was polite. She said, because I told her, I said, "You didn't yell or swear, did you?" At me, because that's not going to help. She
Yeah.
goes, "No, mom," things like that. So again, I mean, every time Keegan, she's been in the emergency room,
Mm.
or any other doctor,
Mm-hmm.
it has not, it's not turned out well. They just threatened, and
Mm-hmm.
that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah. That is extremely frustrating, and I do think that there needs to be some medical reform for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think it might go all the way back to the insurance and big pharma,
Oh
and
yeah.
unfortunately, they got big money and deep wallets. I do not. Otherwise, this would not be an issue. I would hope, but it does raise some questions of what can we do in the medical field, what can we do in the medical community, what can we do as parents, as friends, teachers, brothers, sisters, so on and so forth. What can we do as general people for other people that have a neurodivergent brain, or just maybe are having a bad day? Like, what can we do as a society? And I think that's one of the things that this show is going to be great to explore. Uh, and so, if you've listened to some of the episodes previously, you know that I want to have everyone back on the show. So, uh, can I say, let's look at about a few months, see what kind of kicks on up,
Hmm.
because we all know that everything can literally change in one day.
Yeah.
So 6 months brings a ton of experience, new stories, and maybe we both have some tips and tricks for each other uh, in the next round. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. You have just you're very brave for doing this. You got a lot of strength. And if Katie has even 10% of any of that you do, I know that she's awesome. And so I
She
can.
does.
Oh, that's good. Eh,
I tell her, I said, "Sweet pea," I said, "You are so strong, you don't even know it. Everything you have been
Mm-hmm.
through, you're
Mm-hmm.
extremely strong." She doesn't believe it, but she
Oh
will
no, she
someday.
is. Oh yeah, she'll believe it.
Yeah.
It may take a little bit of looking back and some healing and stuff, but
Yeah.
one day she'll get it. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I've been there
Absolutely.
with the self harm and suicidal ideations and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I can say there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily on fire. But um, speaking of self harm and stuff, do you know what the suicide hotline number is?
I don't know it offhand, no.
Okay. The suicide hotline number is 988. So if we can teach our friends and loved ones how to dial 911, why not
Yeah.
teach our friends and loved ones how to dial 988 in case of crisis or uh, suicidal tendencies? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I am excited to see you back on the show because I can only imagine how much everything has changed, and I'm excited because it sounds like y'all are making strides in the right direction, and I can't wait to see what all the future brings. I do hate that we don't have more time, but I can't wait to get you back on.
Oh, I'm
So
looking forward to it very much. And I'm
awesome.
hoping to offer more help or
Ah,
tips. And I'm hoping to get some from you too, Keegan,
of course.
helping
And
each
don't
other.
Yeah, and don't forget, a lot of this is trying to get stuff out there and heard, because that is one of the biggest ways to healing is to be heard and understood. And as a parent, that is the whole perspective that a lot of people don't have. And I don't really have a whole lot on my show. And so your experience is very valuable. It's unique, no matter what. And tell you what, uh, by next episode, I'll have tried to compile a list of things to try, um, for doctor's appointments, hospital visits, maybe some other resources
Mm-hmm.
that I find along the way.
That'd be
But
wonderful.
yeah, and any of those that I find, I'll also include in the episode link with this so that anyone else can find those as well for their loved ones. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, but stick around for just a little bit and I'll go ahead and cut the recording about here, okay?
Okay. Sounds
All right.
good.
So, thank you very much for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. Until next time, y'all have a good one. Shalom. All right, and stop. All right, that was awesome. Uh, I'm so glad that you're getting uh